And today's lesson draws from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I happen to be reading a book about her, and so I'm going through more of this. And this is just a short piece here that it focuses on a greeting. And as I was reading this, it dawned upon me that the Gnostics wasted very few words in their writings. They were all about educating people, sharing their experiences. And I suspect that many of the Gnostic writings are experiences not only of potentially of Jesus and his teachings, but also of spirit teachings, what we've come to call spirit teachings, with the soul, with a teaching soul speaking through a medium. And so, and also, I would like to point out, I don't know if I did this earlier, that the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is a Coptic writing, which let me see if I can remember. Coptic is a blending of Aramaic and Greek, I believe. But I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
However, what I have found is that the nuances of some of the words are much different than those of Hebrew words or of the Greek words, because typically the Gnostic writings were written in Greek. But this particular one, and this is a translation, so we don't really know if the original wording was in Greek or not, but the fragments are in not Ethiopian, but Coptic writings.
Greek alphabet and ancient Egyptian script.
Okay. Beth likes to play with her phone there and get everything, so thank you.
Gotta have knowledge.
You gotta have knowledge. Exactly, exactly. So I read this piece here. The disciples were grieved. They wept profoundly and said, "How can we go to the Gentiles and preach the good news of the kingdom of the child of humanity? If they did not spare him, how will we be spared?" I want to point out a few things here, and that is one, that the news of the kingdom of the child of humanity. Now, they did not refer to Jesus as the Son of God or of a child of God, but of humanity. And in occult writings, there is a significant difference between mankind and humanity. Humanity focused more on those who are around them, immersing themselves in the divine and nourishing their neighbors, their friends, living a life that we would consider more ethical, more fair. It would be the proper term. Living a life of fairness. And fairness, as you know, has nothing to do with the law. All the law are the basic minimal protections. That's it. That is it. Anything beyond that falls upon each of you. So fairness has little to do with the law. And so when we look at this, we notice that the disciples have been tasked with proclaiming the good news. That's what preaching is all about. Proclamations, making a claim. However, and Coptic, this suggests something a little less bold. And this is where nuances of words is very important. Because in the Coptic language, to preach is to teach. It's not about saying this is the news. It's not about that. It is about sharing, because that's what teaching is. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes.
That's what teaching is. It's a sharing. So they have been tasked with teaching, sharing something that is not widely known of the kingdom of the child of humanity. And most would not pick up on this, these nuances and such. We like the word preach because it invokes power, whereas a teacher does not invoke that power. All of a teacher is someone who shares, tells stories, and that sort of thing. And something else here that may be of interest or may not be of interest is the Gentiles. Because of this particular writing, they write that the Gentiles were responsible for the death of Jesus. However, in the canonical Gospels, it's the Jewish people, the rabbis, who are more responsible for the death of Jesus because they go to those in authority and convinces them to put Jesus to death because they can't get involved in it. It would create a riot. So we really don't know if these writings are slanted in a particular fashion, a particular bias. But all we can do is rely on what Spinoza tells us about Scripture, and that is that they contain the biases of the author and the biases of the time. And a lot of those writings that are in the Bible, that are Gnostic writings, they are typically biased in one way or the other. And with that said, what are your thoughts, Beth?
It's just interesting. Like from historical perspective, it's like it's nice getting away from what most of us were raised with, probably all of us here, which is just that literal interpretation. So it's nice to hear, remember, in this time, whoever wrote using the name Mary Magdalene, got that history. It was Coptic. And I had heard that word before, but I didn't know what it meant. But AI says it's between combination of Greece up here from that whole breadbasket, the Mesopotamian area.
That's the language.
And Egyptian down here, but you've got, two powerful entities. So that just that mixture, it's nice. It's like
and here's an interesting thing, what Beth was referring to was the Coptic language. However, there is a Coptic version of Christianity which is different from Orthodox Christianity and contemporary Christianity. There is a difference. And Sharon, what are your thoughts?
I like the comment, the kingdom of the child of humanity. I like that statement. I just saw something in the last couple days online popped up, and it was this fellow, and I don't know who he was, but he was talking about Mary Magdalene. It's interesting that you would speak about her today. And he said that in the day when, that she was actually a peer, she was her role was the same pretty much as Jesus's role. They walked together in their teaching. She was a teacher, and it was only years later that the church or the men or whoever decided that they didn't like the fact that there was a woman that was an equal. They didn't like that. So that's when they created the whole story about her being a fallen woman or whatever they, she was not a good person and blah, 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 because they didn't like the idea of her being an equal. And I thought, well, I don't know, like I wish that would pop up again, because I'd like to see who this guy was, because it was really interesting that they're actually talking about this today. I don't know where he got his information from, but maybe you're reading the same book. I don't know. Maybe your information is the same as his, but I do feel like her role, is probably understated very much in today's writings, or the writings, just, yeah. So anyway, it's interesting that that you're talking about her today, because now you said the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. Now, is that what your book is called? Is that what you were reading?
Okay, there is a fragment, a collection from a Gnostic Gospel of Mary
Oh, okay.
Magdalene. That's what it is called. You can
Okay.
find it online in a PDF format, and you can download it.
Okay.
Or you can find a book. Now, I think the Gospel of Mary Magdalene may also be included in the other Bible, which is another source that I use quite a bit.
I think I have that. Okay.
And in this particular, the book I'm reading is about, I believe it's titled Mary Magdalene, and it's a
Okay.
very thin book.
Okay.
And in this one, the author talks about different Marys. He draws from different sources. But right now, it's one of my readings that I read during the week. I spend about an hour each morning reading from something. And that happened to be, and that's one of the ones that I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I just happened to have edited a previous teaching from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene from May, I think it was. And it just kind of inspired me to go ahead and draw a little bit from this, because this little piece here is just an opening. It's just an opening. There's not really much teaching in it. But like I said, it dawned on me that, the Gnostics are all about teaching, educating. Their belief is that knowledge is your salvation. Now, I want to touch back on something that you had mentioned, Sharon, about Mary Magdalene being an equal of Jesus. Now, one of the chief competitors of Judaism was the various pagan religions. And I don't quite recall where I may have come across it. It may have been in Stone's book, When God Was a Woman. And in that, she talks about temple priestesses. And the temple priestesses, here's the interesting thing about paganism and the Judaism. Sexuality was not something that was shunned during the pagan times and in their practices. So it was common for them to support the temple through Well, sexual relations with men. And you know how men are. They say that's always on their mind. And with that being said, now these temple priestesses, when they became pregnant, the child was considered a child of their particular patron god. Now, this can easily bring us back to Jesus' mother, Mary, who may have been a temple priestess. There's nothing about her past that's included in that, except for the fact that somewhere along the lines they chose some very bizarre genealogical ways to connect Jesus with David. But as the story goes with Mary, she gave birth, she was a virgin who gave birth to a child. Well, you know, the Son of God, that's usually how they phrase it when they don't know the Father, especially if they were a temple priestess. So Mary very well could have been, Mary Magdalene very well could have been a temple priestess and could have been one of high rank, because according to Stone, before the Aryans came down from the north and invaded their culture, women were the equals of men. And they held positions of authority just like the men did. And some of those stories that we read about gods slaying goddesses are stories about how they took over the culture there, the agricultural culture. So that ties in with what you were saying with that.
Mhm.
And I don't want to monopolize all of this. So Sandy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just love this. I've actually been seeing some stuff popping up lately in my feeds about her and about some interesting uh, side notes of everything. I thought I read, and of course, please forgive me because my memory is horrible, but I thought I read something about her, that book, the book of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene was found amongst some other texts, one of them being the book of Thomas, I think, or something that this was found among other texts, and that according to what I was reading, felt that they were very legitimate texts. They weren't they found these, and that this could be what comprises what you said about the other Bible. Maybe that's the books that are in there. I'm not sure, but it definitely is a very the gospel is very, very interesting. And I also have heard what Sharon was saying about how there came a time well after, centuries after her and this knowledge that things were changed. Part of when you've got Greek and you've got Aramaic and you've got all the other languages, you're going to probably have misinterpretation from one language to the other. So that's part of it. And then you go a little farther down, and then you get the deliberate manipulation to um, force, to gain power and control over people, where you take out, what you take out the guts, you take out the important, and you replace it with the fear and male dominance and all that stuff. So you take that out. So now you've got a truly false, narrative. And I'm seeing a lot of this coming up about about interpreting some of this language because it's amazing how totally different it is. Um, I don't know. I think, you look at one thing and then a bunch of other things pop up, so, but it's been real interesting. And I really like it because some of these just don't mean anything like what's being said today. And I mean, this digresses, but just a couple things like about hell. Like there's nothing in the Bible that ever says anything about hell. They don't. That's there. It's not. But it's taught. It's taught. But it's to bring on fear. But it just I'm really finding this so interesting. And like Sharon said, I really do like the child of humanity because to me, when I hear that, that is more descriptive of Jesus than anything I've ever heard, probably. And of course, humanity is a bad word today, but we don't talk about humanity because it's woke. So, but I mean, I really like that because to me that really encompasses the message. I, I think. Anyway, I'm digressing, but it's really good. I'm enjoying this very much.
Here's a little something that supports what you're sharing there. Now, I've mentioned Spinoza because again, one of the books that I'm reading, Spinoza's theologico-political treatise. And in that, he talks about how scripture, the Bible, is intended for the masses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing about the Gnostics is those writings are intended for thinking people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people who are interested in learning, people don't who don't subscribe to rumors and that sort of thing. I'd like to say they're more for scholarly people, but
Mm-hmm.
that might seem like they're out of reach, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
not. With today's technology, with today's AI, I use Microsoft, so it's going to be Copilot. So with today's Copilot, I can ask these types of questions that would normally take me months to research to find the answer to. And Copilot can sift through everything that is available on the internet, all public databases. And one of the online resources I use is sacredtexts.com. So Copilot could skim through that as well and can pull all of this together for you, which may be why you're seeing things like this come up, because the search engines are now becoming wholly AI, which in some cases makes it difficult to find simple information. But just the same, it can pull up these things that some of you have mentioned. So excellent feedback there. And let me get the last part in here. And Mary stood up and greeted all of them and said to her brothers, "Do not weep or grieve or be in doubt, for his grace will be with you and will protect you. Rather, let us praise his greatness, for he has prepared us and made us truly human." Well, that right there tells us that there is a significant difference when they use the word human, truly human. And the thing to keep in mind is these religions came from someplace. They didn't just spring up on their own. Judaism is a blending of Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, and probably some other minor religious writings and such. And they too taught a difference between, well, as Spinoza would put it, the masses and the mystics. We'll call them mystics. A difference between the masses and the mystics. Even in pagan writings, when we talked about the ritual death, do you remember that conversation we may have had? It would have been right around Easter, because that's when I like to talk about it, is around Easter. The ritual death was about your old life dying and your new life being reborn. You were born into a new life, one that focused on fairness, nourishment. That's where we get the idea of born again, of rebirth. That's where that comes from, as that practice, one of those mystery school practices. And in this particular writing, when she says, made us truly human, that is what she is referring to. Being born into a life that is about fairness, that is about inclusiveness, that is, well, it's about other people and not serving yourself. That's what is implied there. And oh yes, that's exactly what I got here in my notes. You are born into an ethical, more ethical way of life. And mankind would fall into that category of the powers that be. And the powers that be are those who lord it over us, those who seek to oppress us, those who seek to divide us. That's the difference, the contrast they are drawing there. And Mary, who is believed to have lost more or grieved more than the traditional disciples, encourages them by saying, His grace be with you, meaning that Christ has empowered them. That's what grace suggests in the Coptic language. They were empowered, given authority, asked to go out and share your experiences with me. Share that. And when we go back to the book of Acts, where Jesus is there through a portion of it, serving his disciples, preparing food, teaching them and everything, serving, nourishing them. That's what that means, nourishing them. And then he is taken up by clouds. Okay, this is another experience of Jesus. So you could say that the teachers, the soul teachers that speak through me as a medium, are representations of Jesus or Christ. Christ is a general term. And in another Gnostic writing, Christ is referred to as a spirit that taught through the medium Jesus. So there are a variety of ways to interpret this. So Christ empowered them to share their experience of him with others. And she also tells them that Christ has made them human. And what is it that Jesus taught? The two commandments of God. Love God above all else and love your neighbor as yourself. Immerse yourself in the divine. And it's not that you need to find a way to immerse yourself in the divine. It's more along the lines of discovering that you are immersed in the divine, which is an altogether different perception. And yes, perhaps this is a gentle reminder that being human is living a life that favors fairness, the nourishment of those in need of nourishment, and that to cower in fear is more in line with a life of selfishness. And you're right there, Sandy. So what are your thoughts about that and the whole conversation? You're muted.
Sorry. And that none of it is out here. It's all here. It's none of it is external. None of it. And I think, boy, when you really accept that, everything changes. E- Everything is a different perspective. Everything. And it's said, it's actually said. I mean, there are passages that say this, but they still don't, it's still not taught. It's still not accepted, because it's all about the fear and control. So I think that that's, my big takeaway from it too is that the word immersed was not by accident. I feel like that's the whole that is it. So yeah. Hmm. Great, great talk. Hmm.
Good, good.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts, Beth?
Oh, my brain is like
All over the
all
place?
over the place. It's really relevant today. And I was thinking about this earlier this week, because I will read about all the people who just let's just say in the community who rallied to provide food and non-food essentials when the food stamps got cut off. All these little groups, they just rallied. And it's like they discovered their humanity. They rediscovered it. And again, going back to the cycles, that probably wouldn't have happened if we were just going along in a status quo kind of, if we didn't have someone with who's a fascist. and those like that in control. The common people would not have reclaimed their humanity. And I hope that that cycle, that we're on the upswing, that kind of rediscovering, reclaiming our humanity is on the upswing. That part of the cycle is turned, coming into the upside, like the moon waxing.
So good analogy there.
And we've certainly been in a waning period for a long time. So it's gotta wax, it's gotta become bigger, it's gotta become stronger. So,
Yeah, that's these storms that we experience with nature that just tear everything up and such. Sometimes the system has to be dismantled so it can be rebuilt better. Better. Every system, even your internal systems, your circulatory system, your respiratory system, even that, you have to encounter difficulties to remind you to straighten out, to remind you, okay, you're older. You can't do things the way you were doing them 15, 20 years ago. It's that old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. However, when it's broke, fix it right. Fix it right. So, and how about yourself, Sharon?
Well, I liked what Sandy and Beth had to say. I don't really have too much to add, but I really liked what they talked about. If it's a wake-up call, what Beth mentioned about people standing up to the plate and taking and doing what was right. And, I think more and more people are starting to do that. People are definitely waking up and standing up and saying, we're going to make things right again. We're going to make our lives better. We're not going to put up with this, anymore. So, and it seems like that's the direction that they're moving in. So, yeah, that's my contribution, my little contribution.
Well, thank you for your little contribution. And I want to thank each of you for your contributions, because that's what makes us so much better.
Mhm.